This week's shiur is for the refuah shalema of Shoshana bat Miriam and Yosef Shalom ben Chaim Musha, and also Yehuda Tzion ben Esther. This week we have a double parasha, Tazria and Metzorah, and the main topic of this week's parasha is the laws of Tzara'at and the Metzorah, who is the person who suffers from Tzara'at. Now we all know what Tzara'at is. It is the physical embodiment of a spiritual defect. If a person has pegamim, has defects of a spiritual nature, this is the way that it can actually manifest itself in this world in a physical way. Firstly, by manifesting itself on a person's house. The second stage, it would manifest itself on a person's clothing. And thirdly, it would manifest itself on a person's body in the form of tzara'at, which is a white spot, it's like a skin discoloration. And why does it go through these three stages? Well, basically, if stage one is not remains unchecked, then stage two comes into play. And then again, stage two remains unchecked, person doesn't bother about it, goes to stage three. So in the beginning of this week's parasha, we're given a clue into what the ramifications of this is. So it says here, in Perek Yud Gimel, Vayidber Hashem el Moshe ve'el Aaron leimor, Adam ki yihyeh ba'or b'saro se'et u'sapachat. It talks about a person who receives these types of manifestations. And the way a person is described here, it's not the normal description of a person, which would be the word ish, because we have ish is all over the Torah. Ish means man. Here a person is described as Adam. What is the difference between the word Adam and the word ish? The answer is, the ish means man, but it has a plural, anashim, which means men. You have the word isha, which means a woman. The plural of isha is nashim. The word adam has no plural. There's no such word as adamim or adamot. It's adam. Adam means man, but it also means mankind. And Adam is used specifically to describe the Jewish people. How did the Jewish people camp at Har Sinai? We saw a few weeks ago. Ke'ish echad b'leiv echad, which actually doesn't fit in with what I was going to say. But actually, maybe it does fit in. Because the word ish there is used. But it says ish echad, because ish could have the plural anashim. So ish echad means one person. So it's like many people who through their unity sat or stood at Har Sinai as if they were one person. Why were they one person? Why were 600,000 males, or 3 million men, women and children in total? Why were they like one person? The answer is they were unified. They all identified as one central person. Ish echad. So ish echad in effect equals this word Adam. A person who gets tzara'at. Why is he called a person, mankind, a singular? The answer is, the Torah is giving us a hint. It's telling us that a Jew has to be united. If he is not united, if he is anything other than Adam, then you know what happens? He gets tzaraat. If he splits himself off, splits himself away from the tzibur, he talks about his fellow man, thereby causing a pirud, which means a separation from the rest of Klal Yisrael. He cuts himself off. Now he no longer becomes an Adam. The objective of every single Jew is not to be an island unto himself, to borrow from the well-known phrase. A Jew has to aspire to that level that lofty level that we had at Har Sinai, to become Ish Echad, or to become Adam, to become mankind, to become Klal Yisrael, bound together as one. And there's nobody like the Jew. You can see here, as we said, the fact that a person will get tzaraat, will get this spiritual disease, shows that the fact that a person speaks badly will affect and take him away from the tzibur. So the main reason behind tzaraat, behind this spiritual manifestation, it lies in the mouth. Slander, lashon hara, speaking negatively. These are all part of the same thing. Those types of things are only done when a person thinks in a selfish way. If you think you're better than somebody else, you'll speak badly about them. What's to stop you? If you think you're the best, then automatically the other person is much lower than you. So you can speak about them. Because who are they to affect me? Who are they to interfere with me? I'm the ruler of my world. So why should other people affect my world? So I can feel free to talk about them. You're cutting yourself away from the tzibur. And that's why the tzaraat is manifest, because it's such a powerful force to talk negatively and to think negatively. And we're going to see this as we carry on with this shiur. There's one thing that separates us from any other nation in the world, and this was brought home by a story I heard regarding one of the later blood libels that occurred a number of generations ago. I'm not exactly sure how many decades ago. But there was a fellow called Bailus, who was a victim of a blood libel. And during this trial, they were asked if it would be a problem to say that Jewish people, or for it to come out that Jewish people are unlike any other type of people, because the thing that was under question was, how can Jewish people be together and pray for each other and be considered superior to any other nation? How can the Jewish people be considered the chosen people? It's a very common question, and it comes into play every so often. You hear this: the Jews consider themselves the chosen people, and no other nation is chosen. It's a very common question. Mostly Jews will ask that question. Why do we have to go around saying we're the chosen people? It just causes antagonism. So one question is like this: you have this fellow Bailus, whatever his name was, who was schlepped around the courts and convicted of a blood libel. There were Jews all over the world praying for this man. Would it be the same thing if there was an Italian person who was convicted of a certain crime? Would all the Italians, not just in Italy, all over the world, would they all get up and start praying for him? Would it be the same if a Frenchman, all the Francophiles would get up and start praying for this Frenchman? No, it doesn't happen. But one Jew gets taken to court, and suddenly everyone's saying Tehillim, everyone's davening, everyone's mentioning his name in shul. You have one Jew called Ron Arad, who's in prison, or Jonathan Pollard, or whoever the other captives are. All around the world, wherever Jews are, they will pray. There are tefillot which are fixed on Shabbat morning, special prayers just for these captives. Yerachmiel, Baumel, and all the other MIAs. Doesn't happen with any other nation. It's only with the Jews. That's why he's called Adam here. That's why it's called Ish Echad. The emphasis is on Echad. Adam. And when a person slanders, he uses his mouth to cause trouble, to cause a pirud, a separation, he takes himself out of this category. That's why it's so severe. The punishment is so terrible. And there are 2 parashot here that talk all about it. If we go forward to Pasuk Gimel in Perek Yud Gimel, we see who is the person who declares somebody who has tzaraat. Who actually renders him tameh? So if a person is suspected of having this tzaraat, of having this spiritual malady, it has to be assessed. You have to check to see, is it really tzaraat, or could it be maybe like a proper physical disease? So he has to go and check. Does he go to a doctor? Does he go to a surgeon? Does he go to Harley Street? Where does he go? V'ra'a hakohen et hanega ba'or habasar. He goes to the Kohen. He goes to the religious figure. Doesn't go to any medical expert. Doesn't go to some holistic expert. Doesn't go to any faith healer. He goes to the Kohen. The Kohen is the one who checks him over. And listen to this pasuk. So he said, V'ra ha-kohen et hanega. The Kohen sees the blemish on the flesh of the person. V'se'ar banega hafach lavan umare hanega amok me'or basaro nega tzarat hu. So this is all talking about how he checks and he sees the spot and how deep it is, etc. V'ra'ahu ha-kohen v'timei oto. And the Kohen sees it and he declares him it tameh. In this one pasuk, the word ra'ah, to see, is mentioned twice. The Kohen sees it and the Kohen sees it. Why twice? Surely the person comes to the Kohen, he shows him the spot, the Kohen looks, he checks, and he says, Tameh utzahor. What's this checking twice? You have to have a second opinion? A second opinion is normally done with another person. Why the same Kohen checking twice? And the answer to this tells us an insight into how a person has to act in this world with every single other person on a daily basis. The person comes to the Kohen. He's sure that he's got tzaraat. And he comes and the Kohen looks and he examines and he does this check and that check. And in his mind, he concludes, this is tzaraat. It's a nega, it's a spot, and this person has tzaraat. But before the words come out of his mouth and he declares, Tameh, even though it's on paper, tzaraat, everything checks out, it ticks every box, every negative box, and the conclusion is 100%, no question, this person has tzaraat. He has to check again. Because the first time, the Kohen checks the discoloration itself. He checks the physical problem itself. But that's not enough. Because after you check the physical problem, and everything checks 100%, the Kohen must look again, but he must look at the person. He has to look at the person who's got the tzaraat. The person who's got the tzaraat may have some mitigating circumstance. Perhaps this fellow is a Chatan, he's on his way to the chuppah, and now if we're going to declare him Tameh, he's going to have to be outside the camp, and he's going to have to be by himself, away from his kala, away from his family, away from the marvelous wedding. He's going to be by himself. Miserable. What type of wedding is that? So there could be signs of this tzarat, that there is totally unquestionable what it is. But you need to look at the person. The Torah tells us, if it's a Chatan, we don't declare it Tameh. Because there's always mitigating circumstances. There's always the story behind the person as well as the story behind the symptom. So if you look at your friend, or you look at anybody, and you judge that person, and you're sure that this person is wrong, there's no question he's wrong. Or you're sure that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he's guilty. He stole. He was immoral. He sinned. I know he sinned. I don't need any evidence, circumstantial or otherwise. I know 100%. This person's got a track record. Even though in your mind there's no doubt, still look at the person. Look deep. Could there be some other motive? Could there be extenuating circumstances? Do you have to judge him straight away? Could there be something else? Could he have had another motive? Something drawing him to do what he did? Maybe he could have been mistaken. That's called judging favourably. Dan lekaf zechut. Dan lekaf zechut. Judging somebody favourably doesn't mean, well, it's 50-50. He might have done the wrong thing. He might have done the right thing. So let's lean towards the side of and say he's not guilty. No. Even if the person's 100% wrong, and there's no doubt in your mind, find something. Go out of your way, no matter how unlikely it may be. I've told the story before, but I'm going to tell it again. It's my favourite story about judging favourably, and it involves one of my favourite characters, Rabbi Aryeh Levine. There's one story about Rabbi Aryeh Levine. He was asked, Rabbi Aryeh, how come you always judge people favourably? Were you always like this? Does it come naturally to you? He said to that person, look, I'll tell you exactly how. There was one specific incident that made me decide to always judge people favourably. He said, once I was at a funeral of a friend of mine, and it was a very sad occasion. There were many people there. It was very tragic. And my friend who was the niftar had a friend who was still alive. He had a very good friend. So, in other words, a mutual friend who was still alive. And I looked in the crowd if I could see this mutual friend, who I was sure would be there. He was nowhere to be found. There were all sorts of acquaintances and people who hardly knew the niftar were there, or people who just came to pay respects. And this guy, this very good friend, was nowhere to be seen. I was very curious. What's going on? And towards the end of the funeral, I see this friend rushing quickly to come and accompany to pay respects and to accompany the levaya. And I was shocked, and I was actually a little bit concerned. How could you come late to your friend's levaya? And I said to myself, should I say something? Should I not say something? And I decided to go and say something to him. I went up to the fellow, I said, look, this person who passed away was such a good friend of yours. Why were you not there? Is there something more important? There's another detail that I missed out. When I saw this fellow running to quickly catch up with the funeral, he didn't come straight to come and accompany the levaya. He ran to go and to a flower stall, and he bought a potted plant, and he ran away, and then he came back, and then he joined the funeral. What's going on? So I was curious, So I questioned him. I said, "What's going on? You need to buy plants? Can't you buy plants another time?" He told me, "There's a reason why I'm doing this." He said, "You think I don't want to come to my friend's funeral?" He said, "There was a person who's just been diagnosed with a very severe and highly contagious illness. And it's possibly chronic. And this disease is so contagious that even the kalim, even the clothing and the utensils belonging to this person, this was at the time in Israel. Obviously, this was where that was the where they were at in what am I trying to say? Medical science at that time demanded that they would have to incinerate any item which had had any contact with a person who had this contagious disease. Probably nowadays that wouldn't be the case, or this disease would have been treatable. But they said any item belonging to that person immediately has to be incinerated. There's a risk of contagion, even in clothing and other items. And among the items they wanted to burn was this man's tefillin. So I pleaded with the doctors, please, at least let me bury the tefillin. These are holy Jewish articles. And the non-religious Jewish doctor said no. But he felt sorry for me, and he said to me, look, I'll give you an hour. Go and find something you can bury these holy tefillin, and I will let you bury them. So I missed my friend's levaya, and I went to buy a potted plant, I threw the plant away, I took the pot, I ran back, and I went to the hospital, I took the tefillin, and I buried the tefillin in the pot. And that's why I'm late. And when Rabbi Levine heard this story, he said, oy vey, look what a far-reaching, convoluted story I've just heard. Who would ever imagine such a thing? Such a story? And this is true. This really happened. Since then, nothing can be too unlikely. And he vowed to himself he would never judge anybody unfavourably. So who are we? Who are we to quickly dismiss somebody as unfavourable in our eyes, or guilty in our eyes? Can't we think of anything? But it takes effort. You have to think. You have to consider the person in your mind. What type of person is he? Maybe he's having a bad day. He woke up the wrong side of bed. There might be some other circumstances he was going through at the time. There could be a million reasons. But a million reasons need time and effort to think about. But it's the easiest thing to just say, he's a nothing, he's a nobody, he's guilty. For sure he must have done that. For sure he must be whatever he is. It's worth taking the time and expending the effort and looking and considering the person in a favourable light. Just like the Kohen. He doesn't look once. And when he does just look the once, he has to look twice. Even if it checks out 100%. He has to look at the person. And that's the most difficult thing. There were 3 stages to this tzara. If a person misuses his speech, the first sign would be that the person's house will develop these discolorations. They'll be on the bricks and the mortar of the house. And that's when the alarm bells should start ringing. Now, if that doesn't stop it, it goes on the clothes. If that doesn't stop it, it goes on the person. Now, let's talk about stage 1. If a person got the discolorations on his house, he would go to the Kohen, and the Kohen would say to him, knock out those bricks. And when a person will knock out those bricks, we're talking about Eretz Yisrael now, Canaan, a person would find that these bricks were hollow, and that buried in these bricks would be treasure. Where did this treasure come from? The Emorim, who used to live in Canaan, hid their personal treasures inside the walls of their houses. Now, when the Jews came in and took over these houses, they had no idea there was treasure buried in these walls. But they would only find out when there would be tzarat, which would be manifest on the bricks, and they would knock out these bricks, and then they would find this treasure. So the long and the short of it would be that when a person would be in a situation where it would become public knowledge that he was guilty of slander or gossip, then and only then would he discover that he's got a big treasure chest, big cache of gold inside his house. Now this is incredible. A person speaks Lashon Hara. He gets a stage 1 manifestation of Tzaraat. I can't really translate Tzaraat. They say Tzaraat, and the word Tzaraat means leprosy, but it's a very, very loose translation. So I'm just going to say Tzaraat. Again, a physical manifestation of a spiritual defect. So a person gets this stage 1 sign. He sees on his house these discolorations on the walls. So he knows, I must have spoken Lashon Hara, I must have said something bad. Now he comes and knocks out the bricks and finds treasure in his house. He gets a reward for speaking Lashon Hara. How can this be? Since when? It's counterintuitive. So, I had a beautiful answer for this. Remember, bearing in mind there are 3 stages. And each stage of the way, the second stage, the following stage comes when the first stage gets ignored and remains unchecked. Until a person is diagnosed by the Kohen as Tameh, and the person is told, you have to leave the machaneh, you have to leave the camp and go outside the camp and remain alone, remain in solitary confinement. So now when a person gets to stage 1 and he goes to the Kohen, the Torah says he goes to the Kohen. He volunteers the information to the Kohen. So he realizes something is wrong. Of course he doesn't sit there and say, let's ignore it, let's hope it goes away, like a bad dream. He wants the problem knocked on the head. He wants to nip it in the bud. So straight away he goes and asks help. At that point, there's a change in a person's psyche. At that point, he admits something is wrong. People don't like to admit something is wrong. When people get earaches and headaches and stomach aches and leg aches, the first thing that goes through a person's mind is, let's leave it. Let's wait. And only when it's really, really hurting him, now he'll go to the doctor. People can nag, should go, you never know what it is, whatever. No, let's forget it. And even when they get an appointment, they can't wait. They can't wait to get it over with. And then they want to go and get a second opinion. People don't like to admit. It's very painful. So already, you see, when this person sees a sign that the alarm bells are ringing, for him to go straight to the Kohen, that's a big move. Because now you're acknowledging something. And now when he goes to the Kohen, and the Kohen comes and says, I see what you mean. This is Tzaraat. He tells the person whose house is affected, knock out those bricks, and then he finds the hidden cache, C-A-C-H-E, cache, not C-A-S-H. He finds the hidden golden cache, and then that's the reward. Why is the reward? Because the first thing a person does, he admits there's something wrong. What does a person do when he admits something's wrong? That is teshuvah. A person says, I've done something wrong, I know it's wrong, I want to do teshuvah. A person deserves to get rewarded if he does teshuvah. If he ignores it and says, look, it's probably dry rot or mould. There's very damp around here. There's always dry rot and subsidence in these type of houses. No, this is nothing. He finds every excuse under the sun. He points to everywhere except pointing at himself. If you do that, then you're going to move on to stage 2. If you move on to stage 2 and even that gets ignored, then you get to stage 3, when it gets onto your body. What does the Torah say when it gets onto your body? Does it say the person goes to the Kohen when he finds his tarat? It doesn't say that. It says the Kohen finds the person. He gets taken to the Kohen against his will. By that stage, a person is in denial. He's in such a state of denial that he has to be slapped to the Kohen. And that's not voluntary. That's not the teshuvah. That's a reaction to a problem. That's not volunteering your information. That's not volunteering that something's wrong. That's been taken against your will. Already by that stage, there's no reward. By that stage, that's not a proper teshuvah. It doesn't mean a person can't do teshuvah. Of course, teshuvah is open to a person, even if a person is at a very, very severe stage of the sin. Teshuvah is always open to a person. Perhaps a person may not have siyata deshmaya, help from heaven, with doing teshuvah. It's also quite a rare case. But the doors are never closed. It's very important to remember this. The doors are never closed to a penitent person. If you want to do teshuvah, there's always a way. Always. And 99 times out of 100, you will get help from Hashem, especially if it's really 100% sincere. But look what happens when he wants to check it, nip it in the bud at stage 1. He gets a physical reward. How much more so when a person realizes he's done an Aveirah? And which person doesn't do Aveirah? Which person is 100% clean? Doesn't exist. So if a person realizes he's done an Aveirah and he feels bad about it, and he says, "Oi, if only I didn't do that," and he corrects himself, then the sin doesn't only get wiped out, the sin becomes a mitzvah. It becomes his stepping stone to being stronger in resisting the Aveirah in the future. It doesn't mean, I'll do the Aveirah and then I'll do Teshuvah. It doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. You cannot do it lechatchila. You cannot do it initially and say, I'm going to sin and then I'm going to do Teshuvah and I'll become stronger. No, it doesn't work like that. When a person succumbs to sin, and hopefully we won't have to succumb to sin of any level, but when a person does succumb to sin, we're only human, then a person should have this mindset. Nip it in the bud immediately. Do teshuvah. Resolve. Knock it out. Use it to become stronger. Use it as a stepping stone in becoming more of a gibor, to make you more mighty in defeating the Aveirah. Moving forward to Perek Yud Dalet, we talk about the way a person atones, the purification process for a Metzorah, which is a person who suffers from tzarat. In the beginning of Parashat Metzorah, Pasuk Dalet, it says, "V'tzva HaKohen v'lakach lamitaher shtei tziporim chayot tohorot." The initial stage of a person's purification from this tzarat, he has to bring 2 birds, 2 tziporim. Says the Zohar HaKadosh, these 2 birds that a person brings signifies 2 different types of things, 2 different types of kaparot, of atonement. The first bird is to atone for lashon hara, for evil speech. And the second bird comes to atone for good speech, says the Zohar. That's very puzzling, because up until now we've talked about lashon hara and rechilut and all the bad things, gossip, tale-bearing, slander. What does the Zohar mean? You have to bring a bird offering, especially to atone for good speech? Good speech is good. What's the kapara? So I saw something by Rabbi Franz who quotes the Sefer Shemen HaTov. And he says, you know why you have to atone for good speech? It's not the good speech itself needs rectification. No, of course not. Person speaks good, it's good. It's the other side, it's the flip side. It's the lack of good speech. When good speech would be appropriate, and a person doesn't offer the good speech. When a person is in a position to say, thank you, or to say this is good, or to say I appreciate you, or I love you, or I want to give you my time, that's even worse in a way than the bird that's a kapara for evil speech. Because a person is not put in any position without a reason. You are not placed in this world in any circumstance or any situation unless you have a choice. You are given into circumstances which are beyond your control, of course, because a person can't choose, as we talked about last week, a person can't choose whether he's born a male or a female, or a Kohen or a Levi or Israel. Of course, this is beyond your control. But a person is given those choices, and once he's in a certain situation, he's got a choice. Do I go to the left? Do I go to the right? Do I say yes? Do I say no? Do I do good? Do I do bad? And the choice for good, or to withhold saying good, that's also a choice. When you walk into a room, do you kiss the mezuzah? When someone helps you with something, when someone opens the door for you, you say thank you, or you ignore them. When somebody's providing you with a service, do you say thank you, or do you say, no, he's working for me, I paid him, do I say thank you? Or do you act like I always say? I always tell the story about a certain Dayan that I know. Should be praised for this one act. I was once photographing I don't remember his son's or his daughter's wedding, and he came up to me with a huge smile on his face. He said, thank you very much. I said, Dayan, it was my pleasure. My job and my pleasure. He said to me, your job? He said, does that mean I don't have to say thank you? He was saying to me, just because I paid you to do a job, does that mean I've paid him, he has to do his job and then that's it? No. You're not potted from saying thank you. It doesn't take you out of the obligation of simple gratitude. It's nothing to do with anything. It's a common problem these days. People think that you pay a person to do a job, you own them. And, anyway. I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about. There's always room to say thank you. So much so that if a person withholds that positive speech, he has to bring a kapara for it. He'll be held accountable for it. Sometimes a person may need your encouragement. This is also a very common problem. And you decide, look, that's not my problem. Or you may not be so callous. You might feel for the person. You might think, that person's a nebuch, and really I should extend myself to him. I should invite him for Shabbos. But I'm busy next week. And next week after that I'm also busy. And next week after that I'm also busy. I really want to. I just can't do it. Perhaps that might require a kapara. Maybe that's why a person has to bring the second bird offering. You were put in the position where you were made near to that person, where you were put in contact with that person who needs to be invited for Shabbat, who needs to be encouraged when they feel down. What do? That's also a choice. It's also a choice to extend yourself or to do nothing. People think if they're passive, that's parev. No. If you are passive, you have made a statement. You have made a choice. You have either passed or failed that test that Hashem gave you. Shev v'al ta'aseh, to sit and be passive, is not an answer. It's not an end in and of itself. It's not parav. You've done something positive. It's always worth bearing in mind. And I believe it's the Chidush Harim, one of the Gera Rebbes, I'm 90% sure it's the Chidush Harim, says the following. He says, you know the word oneg and the word nega have the same letters. Nega, nun, gimel, ayin, and oneg, ayin, nun, gimel, the same letters. They are rearranged. Oneg, they're actually what's it called? Backwards. If you put nega backwards, it's oneg. If I'm not mistaken. Nega, oneg. Yes. What's the difference between these two words, backwards and forwards? Says the Chidush Harim, it's where you put the ayin. Ayin nun gimel. You put the ayin, the letter ayin, which also means ayin. Ayin means eye. You put your eye in the beginning, you look in the beginning, you judge a person with your eye favourably, you put the eye first, then it's oneg. If you put your eye at the back, you're judging a person with a good eye, always is subsidiary, is always at the end, then you will have nega. A person's job in this world is to use his eye as an ayin tov, like it says in Pirkei Avot. Judge person favourably. Always look with a good eye. Doesn't just mean when you give out the challah at the Shabbos table, make sure to give him a gezunta piece of challah. That's also ayin tov. Have to give a person from the best. Don't be tsar ayin. Don't be narrow-sighted and give just to be yotze a little tiny bit. It also applies to anything in this life. Be broad-spirited. Always think bigger. Think like you've got I'm always thinking photography. Think like you've got a wide-angle lens. You've got a beautiful fisheye lens. You can see to the side. You've got an 8mm fisheye on your camera, and you can see, 90 degrees practically. Fantastic! I can almost see behind me. That's what you've got to be. You've got to look. Forget rose-coloured glasses. Look with fisheye lenses. Maybe that's why the lesson of the fish is so powerful. We always talk about fish. Keneged ayin hara. It's just occurred to me now. A fish has fish eyes, hence the term fish eye lens. He can see to the side. So we also have to be like a fish. You want to avoid ayin hara? Always look as widely as possible. When you look at a person, don't just look narrow. He's a bad person and that's it. There's no answer to it. That's it. Look to the side, look all around the person. Like we said before, always try and mitigate the person's actions. And I'm going to finish now with another very important message. And it's to do with everything that I've mentioned so far. Throughout these parashiot, there is one category of person that is mentioned, I think, 50 or maybe even more than 50 times. That person is the Kohen. The Kohen is at play in this whole scenario with the person who's to do with the person who's diagnosed with this tzaraat. He's at play. He's in the whole game from the beginning, when the person is first diagnosed, all the way through the process, right to the end, till a person is finally declared tahor. Now you would think, again, we always talk about the Torah being very terse, being very concise, only using letters and vowels and words when it's completely necessary. Each letter, each tug, each crown on each letter teaches us a myriad of lessons. Why in these parashiot is the Kohen's name mentioned again and again and again, 50 times? The Kohen does this, the Kohen does that, go to the Kohen, look at the Kohen, speak to the Kohen. Just say, in the beginning, the fellow goes to the Kohen, he says tahor or tameh, whatever, and then the person has to do this, that, the other, whatever, and then at the end he goes to the Kohen and that's it. Why every time mention the Kohen again and again and again? The reason the Kohen's name is mentioned so many times is to show you quite simply that the Kohen is involved in every stage of the way. A person, lo aleinu, falls into this terrible situation. He finds the tzaraat on his house, and then on his clothes, and then on his body. Now he gets taken to the Kohen. A person can feel so alone, so desperate. He thinks, oy vey, if I would have done in the beginning, I would have just admitted it, I would have gone to the Kohen, and when it was on the house, I would have got the gold. I could have stopped it there and then. I let it go too far. And a person feels so solitary and so depressed. And if a person feels depressed, like the Ramchal calls depression Mara Shchora, the black Mara, the black disease, the black illness. It's blackness. Depression is darkness, nothingness. You can't see beyond it. You can't see your hand in front of your face when a person is depressed. Such a terrible disease that is. Such a terrible psychological illness. If a person feels depressed, he can do any form of Aveira. He can do all the Aveiras in the world. Because he feels he's like nothing. If I'm worthless, who cares what I do? None of my deeds have any ramification. I can do what I want. I might as well have a good time. Comes the Torah and mentions the Kohen's name 50 times to show us you are not alone. There's a Kohen. There's a holy man. There's the chosen priest of Hashem. He's going to accompany you the whole way. He's going to be holding your hand. He's Hashem's shaliach, Hashem's messenger in this earth, in this world, who's going to take you and guide you and talk you through it to show you you're not alone. You're not solitary. You're a Jew and you need help. You need assistance and you need somebody to hold your hand and to help you and to show you that you're not a nobody. Nowadays, Baruch Hashem, we don't have tzaraat. But we do have people who are alone. We have people who suffer from depression. We have people who suffer from being solitary. We have people who feel like nobody cares about them. And sometimes we know who these people are. And we can stretch out our hands to them. Hashem takes the trouble, as it were, of using 50 words to show you that a person should never be alone. Should never feel like nobody cares about them. Only today my Chavrusa told me something. That he went into kollel when he started a kollel at one stage in his life at a certain place. And this kollel was not just for Avreichim, there were Balabatim there as well. There were people and yeshiva boys learning there who were not necessarily part of the kollel program. And after going one or two times learning in the kollel, he spotted a boy there who was sitting learning by himself. And he approached this boy outside of the kollel and he started talking to him. He said, "How are you? How long have you been learning here?" And this boy said to him, "You know what? You're the first person who's spoken to me since I started learning in this kollel." So my friend said to him, "How long have you been learning here?" He said to him, 18 months. This fellow, this young boy, he's not a loud boy, he's a quiet boy. He's been coming to this kollel and learning for a year and a half. Not one person had spoken to him. Now I know when you're in the Beit HaMidrash, you can't just start talking to people. You can't walk up to people and say, "Hi, how are you?" You're there for a reason. You're there to learn Torah. You can't just talk about anything. But there's a place outside the Beit HaMidrash called the outside world. And this young man didn't live in the yeshiva. He occasionally went out. When a person goes out, you can still approach them there. He doesn't stay there the whole time. There are people out there who are solitary like this. And they need a shoulder to cry on. They need their story to be heard. They need encouragement. I'll tell you, I'm not going to end off with this sad story. I'm going to tell you a happy story about somebody and a chavrusa. I had another friend who was learning in a certain kollel, and he couldn't find a chavruta. In fact, he told me this story when I complained to him that I couldn't find a chavruta, and I was feeling a bit low. This was a number of years ago. I said, look, I've been looking for a chavruta. He said, let me tell you my story. He said, when I went to learn in a certain kollel, I also asked. I said, I need a chavruta. They said, there's nobody available, what do you want? And I kept asking and asking and asking. Nobody would give him a chavruta. What did he do? I would not recommend this to everybody, by the way. In the middle of Seder, in this particular kollel, he went to the light switch, flicked the light switch off. Suddenly, everyone's learning in the dark. And he announced, if I don't get a chavruta now, the lights are not going on. Needless to say, they found him a chavruta there and then. And that was the end of the story. It's not for everybody. But why did he have to go to such desperate measures? Not everybody has got that chutzpah like that. In a way, it's a good chutzpah. He came from a good place. But not everybody is as outgoing like that. This fellow happens to be very, very outgoing. Probably most of you know who he is, actually. Or at least... Anyway. But there are people who are quiet. They're timid people. They're not outgoing people. They need to be drawn close to you. They could be sitting quietly and never talking to anybody. And it's up to us, the people who know the story of the Cohen. They know the story that the Cohen is mentioned so many times to teach us. Nobody needs to be solitary. Nobody must be left behind. We're not a people who are separate entities. Like we said, we're an Adam. We are one person. And if we break the Adam, then we get into all sorts of problems. Bezrat Hashem, all of us should learn this lesson and pass this lesson on. To realize that we're all one Adam. We're all special. And we deserve to be the Aman, to be recognized as the Aman Nivchar, the chosen people. And eventually we will be, sooner than we think, we will be recognized by the nations as Am Yisrael, as the Goy Kadosh. We will spread the message and bring Mashiach. It should happen techef umiyad. In our time we should all stand and dance with Mashiach in Yerushalayim and bring the Geula Shalema. Bezrat Hashem. techef umiyad v'chein yasam v'lomar Amen.